twin brother showed up at the rehab clinic with his arm in a cast and cigarette burns on the back of his hand. I knew right then somebody was going to pay for it. My name is Hank Novak. I am 64 years old, a retired smoke jumper out of Boise, and the meaner half of a pair of identical twins. People call me difficult. My ex-wife called me impossible. The state of Idaho called me a hero 3 times and a liability twice. But none of that matters right now. What matters is what I saw on my brother Gene's skin when he rolled up his sleeve in the parking lot of the Pine Ridge Recovery Center, where I had been drying out for the 4th time in 6 years. Before I tell you how I made a grown man weep on his own marble floor, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from. Hit subscribe if you believe that people who hurt the elderly deserve every ounce of what is coming to them. Gene pulled into the gravel lot driving his black Range Rover, the one that cost more than the entire wing of the clinic I slept in. He owned 400 acres of premium vineyard in Napa Valley. His Pinot Noir had won gold at the Decanter Awards twice. He was worth somewhere north of $90 million, and he stepped out of that truck looking like a man who had lost everything. He flinched when I hugged him. That was the first sign. Gene never flinched. He was the gentle one, sure, the brother who wrote poetry and named his grape varieties after Greek gods. But he was never fragile. Not until now. I pulled his sunglasses off. His right eye was swollen half shut, a mess of purple and green. There were marks on his neck that looked like fingerprints. "Who did this to you?" I said. My voice came out low and flat, the voice I used when a wildfire shifted direction and my crew had 30 seconds to decide whether to run or dig in. Gene started crying. Right there in the parking lot with the Oregon rain drizzling on his expensive jacket, my big brother, older by 7 minutes, broke down like a child. "It is Dustin," he whispered. "My son-in-law. He wants me to sign over the vineyard, the estate, everything. When I refused, he broke my wrist. He twisted it behind my back like I was nothing." Dustin Kerrigan. The man who had married Gene's only daughter, Jolene, 3 years ago in a ceremony that cost $400,000. The man Gene had welcomed into his home, given a VP title at the winery, and treated like the son he never had. I looked at my brother. Then I looked at my own reflection in the car window. Same face. Same jawline. Same gray hair, though mine was longer and wilder. The only real difference was the thick beard I had grown during my stay at Pine Ridge, and the fact that my eyes still carried the heat of a man who had walked into burning buildings for a living. "Give me your jacket," I said. Gene blinked. "What?" I pulled off my flannel. "Your jacket, your keys, your wallet. You are staying here. Tell the nurses you are me. Tell them you had a rough night. They will believe it. I have rough nights all the time." Gene shook his head. "Hank, you cannot. Dustin is dangerous. He was a collegiate wrestler. He is strong and he is cruel." I laughed. It was not a happy sound. "He wrestled in college, Gene. I jumped out of planes into forest fires. Give me the jacket." We swapped clothes in the men's room of a gas station down the road. I shaved off the beard I had been growing for 8 months. When I looked in the mirror, Gene stared back at me. Same worried eyes, same age spots, same slightly crooked nose. We both broke in the same Little League game 57 years ago. But behind those eyes, something Gene did not carry. A pilot light that had never gone out. I drove the Range Rover south toward Napa. 400 miles of highway to think about what I was going to do to Dustin Kerrigan. By the time I crossed the California state line, I had a plan. Not a good plan. A mean one. The estate was ridiculous. Stone walls, iron gates, a driveway lined with Italian cypress trees. The main house was a Tuscan-style villa with 8 bedrooms and a wine cellar that held 12,000 bottles. Gene had built it with his own hands and his own money over 20 years. Now a 32-year-old finance bro with a wrestling scholarship and a gambling habit was running it like his personal kingdom. I parked in the circular drive and shuffled toward the front door, imitating Gene's cautious walk, the walk of a man expecting to be hit. The door swung open before I reached it. Dustin stood there in a fitted polo shirt and pressed slacks, looking like he had stepped out of a catalog for people you want to punch. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw that probably looked good on a magazine cover, but would look even better with a bruise on it. He did not say hello. He looked at my cast, the one Jean had been wearing, which I had replicated with an ace bandage and a splint from the clinic's supply closet. "Did you bring the papers?" he said. I lowered my head. I let my shoulders drop. I made my voice small. "I need more time, Dustin. Please, my wrist still hurts." Dustin grabbed my collar and yanked me inside. The motion was fast, practiced. He had done this before, many times. "You have had enough time, old man." He shoved me into the foyer wall. A framed photo of Jean's late wife rattled on its hook. "The trustees meet on Friday. If those shares are not transferred by then, I swear to God I will make last week look like a massage." Every instinct in my body told me to put him through the drywall. My hands knew exactly how to do it, but I swallowed it. I whimpered. I let him see fear. Not yet. The fire was not ready to burn yet. That first night, I understood what my brother had been living through. Dinner was served at the long oak table in the dining room. Dustin sat at the head, eating a prime rib that the private chef had prepared. Jolene sat to his right, picking at a salad, her eyes locked on her plate. She looked beautiful and exhausted, the way hostages look after they have stopped fighting. In front of me, the chef placed a bowl of plain white rice. No butter, no salt, not even a glass of water until I asked twice. Dustin carved his steak with theatrical precision. He pointed the knife at me. "You know, Jean, I have been thinking, the guest house might be more appropriate for someone in your condition. The main house has too many stairs. Dangerous for a man your age. You could trip." He smiled when he said the word trip, the same way you smile when you tell a joke that is not funny, but you want the other person to know you are not joking. Jolene whispered without looking up. "Dad, just eat. Please." She knew. She knew everything. And she was not going to lift a finger. That realization was a knife in my chest worse than anything Dustin could do with a steak blade. I ate the rice. I played the broken man. But under the table, my hands were steady and my mind was mapping every exit, every weapon, every weakness in the enemy's perimeter. At 2 a.m, the bedroom door opened. I had been expecting it. Jean had told me about the nighttime visits, the whispers, the gaslighting. He thought he was developing dementia. He was not. He was being systematically driven insane. Dustin crept across the carpet in bare feet. I could smell bourbon and cologne. He leaned over the bed and whispered in a voice designed to worm its way into a sleeping man's nightmares. "Jean, you left the burners on again. The whole kitchen smells like gas. You are going to kill us all, you senile old fool." I lay perfectly still. I controlled my breathing. I let him do his little performance. Then he reached for the nightstand. I heard a pill bottle rattle. He was switching Jean's blood pressure medication, just like Jean had suspected, but had been too afraid to confirm. That was when I moved. My hand shot from under the blankets and locked around his wrist. Not a grab, a clamp. 30 years of gripping fire axes and hauling 200-pound men out of collapsing structures had given me a grip that could crush walnuts barehanded. I found the nerve cluster between his radius and ulna and pressed. Dustin let out a sound I had never heard a grown man make. It was high and thin, like air escaping a balloon. I opened my eyes. I stared straight up at him in the dark. "If you ever sneak into this room again," I whispered, "they will find you at the bottom of the vineyard hill, with both your kneecaps facing the wrong direction. Do you understand me?" He tried to pull free. He could not. For all his wrestling trophies, he had never grappled with a man whose hands had been forged in fire. I held him for 5 more seconds, then I released him. He stumbled backward, tripped over his own feet, and hit the floor hard. He scrambled out of the room like a dog that had been kicked, and I heard his bedroom door lock from the inside. I sat up in the dark and examined the pill bottle he had been reaching for. I opened it and shook a tablet into my palm. Jean took lisinopril. 20 milligrams, small white oval pills with an imprint code. These were round, blank, and chalky. I touched one to my tongue. Sweet. Vitamin C or a sugar tablet. Gene's real medication had been swapped out. His blood pressure had been uncontrolled for God knows how long. An aneurysm or a stroke could happen any day, and it would look completely natural. I put the fake pills in my pocket. Evidence. I was going to need a lot of it. The next morning I made Dustin's coffee. He drank it fast because he had a meeting with the distributors at 10. I had added a generous pour of magnesium citrate, the surgical-grade laxative I found in Gene's medicine cabinet. The bitterness of the dark roast hid the salty taste perfectly. He was gone by 8:30. By 10:15 I got a text on Gene's phone from the winery's operations manager. It read, "Mr. Novak, the distributor meeting ended early. Mr. Kerrigan had a medical episode during his presentation. The Whole Foods buyers left. He was taken to urgent care but discharged. He says he thinks it was food poisoning." I sat on Gene's porch, looking out at the rows of Pinot Noir vines climbing the hillside, and I laughed so hard I almost fell out of the chair. But the laughter died fast. The switched pills were not a prank. They were attempted murder by slow neglect. Dustin was not just a bully. He was a patient killer who wanted Gene to die quietly so he could inherit the estate and settle his debts. Gene had mentioned Dustin's gambling. I needed to know how deep that hole really was. That afternoon, while Dustin was recovering from his public humiliation, I searched his home office. The door was locked. I picked it with a bobby pin and the piece of wire from the tool shed. Standard pin. Tumbler. 30 seconds. Inside, I found what I was looking for in the back of the filing cabinet. Dustin kept meticulous records of his own destruction, credit card statements showing $60,000 in charges at 3 different casinos in a single month, a promissory note for $1.2 million owed to a private lending group based in Las Vegas, the kind of lenders who do not take you to court when you miss a payment. They take you to a parking garage, and tucked behind the ledger, a life insurance policy on Gene, $2 million, with Dustin listed as the sole beneficiary. The policy was only 4 months old. I photographed everything. Then I called Ira Greenfeld, Gene's attorney for 30 years, a man built like a fireplace and twice as hard to move. I told him who I was and what I had found. He did not sound surprised. "I knew that boy was rotten," Ira said. "But Gene would never let me act. He kept saying Dustin would change. He kept protecting Jolene. I told Ira I needed cameras. He arrived that evening with 4 pinhole devices disguised as screws. We installed them in 40 minutes. 1 in the master bedroom, 1 in the Dustin's office, 1 in the living room, and 1 in the kitchen. Each one streaming encrypted footage to a cloud server only Ira could access. That night, at the dinner table, I decided to push Dustin harder. He was cutting into a lamb chop, still pale from the day's events, his ego clearly wounded. He had changed his shirt twice since coming home. The stain on his reputation would take longer to wash out. I looked at him. "Dustin," I said, keeping my voice meek but clear. "I was looking at the company books today. Who is Ridgepoint Capital? They billed us $380,000 for consulting, but I cannot find a single report they ever delivered." Dustin's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked at me with the dead eyes of a man calculating whether to lie or attack. "That is not your concern, Gene. I handle the finances. The address is a mailbox in Reno," I continued, "and the payment started 6 months ago, right around the time you joined the board. I think I need to ask Ira to run an audit." The color drained from his face. He set his fork down. His jaw tightened. "You are not calling anyone. You are going to finish your dinner and go to bed. Or so help me God, I will put you in a home by Monday. I will have you declared incompetent. I have a doctor who will sign the papers." Jolene looked up for the first time. "Dad, please, just let it go." I looked at my niece, the girl Gene had raised alone after his wife died of cancer when Jolene was 11. The girl he had driven to ballet and choir and college orientations. The girl who now sat 3 feet from the man abusing her father and said, "Let it go." "Why do you let him do this, Jolene?" I asked. She froze, her eyes filled with tears. "Because I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. "Because without him, I have nothing. I do not know how to do anything. I have never had a job. I do not even have my own bank account." Dustin slammed his palm on the table. "Shut up, Jolene. Do not talk to him about our business." He reached across and grabbed her wrist. She winced. I filed it away. Another charge. Another crime. I went to bed and watched the camera feed on Jean's phone. At 11:45, Dustin entered his office. He opened the wall safe. He pulled out stacks of cash, a passport that was not his, and a handgun, a compact 9mm. He checked the magazine. Full. He slid it into his waistband and picked up the phone. The audio feed was crystal clear. "Yeah, it is me. I am done waiting. Tomorrow night. I'm going to handle it myself." He falls down the cellar stairs. I call it in the morning. 72 hours later, I have the insurance payout, and I am on a plane to Costa Rica. He paused, listening. "Jolene? She will do what I tell her. She always does. And if she does not, she can join him at the bottom of those stairs." I put the phone down. I sat in the dark for a long time. The rage was not hot anymore. It was geological. It was the kind of pressure that forms diamonds or destroys cities. He was going to kill me tomorrow. He was going to throw Jean down the wine cellar stairs and flee the country. And he would leave Jolene behind, or worse. Fine. Let him come. But the stairs were going to be a lot more crowded than he expected. The next morning, I called Ira and told him to contact the Napa County Sheriff and the District Attorney. I told him to send every second of footage to both offices. Then I told him about the Vineyard's annual charity gala, scheduled for that evening at the estate. 200 guests, local press, the lieutenant governor's wife on the invite list. We agreed. The takedown would happen at the gala. Maximum exposure, maximum humiliation, minimum chance of Dustin slipping away to Costa Rica with a fake passport and a loaded gun. I spent the day preparing. I moved the real gun from his safe to a lockbox in the garage and replaced it with an identical-looking starter pistol I found in the prop room of the winery's event space. If Dustin reached for his weapon tonight, the only thing it would fire was noise. At 6 o'clock, the guests began arriving. The vineyard was lit with string lights. A jazz quartet played under the oak trees. Dustin worked the crowd in a navy suit, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, playing the role of the dutiful son-in-law managing the family legacy. He was magnificent at it. That was the terrifying part. Jolene stood beside him in a silver dress, smiling the smile of a woman held together by prescription medication and willpower. I stayed inside, watching from the library window, wearing Jean's best charcoal suit. I had wrapped my head in a bandage and put my arm back in the sling. When the moment came, the visual would matter. At 7:30, Dustin took the stage. He tapped the microphone and the crowd went silent. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said, his voice smooth and warm. "As many of you know, my father-in-law Gene has been struggling with his health. It breaks my heart to say this, but Gene has decided to step away from the day-to-day operations of the vineyard. He has asked me to carry the torch forward." Applause. Sympathetic murmurs. Dustin lowered his head, perfecting the look of a man burdened by responsibility. "In honor of Gene's legacy, I am announcing tonight that Novak Vineyards will be restructuring under new leadership. My leadership. I promise you, the quality and the tradition will continue." More applause. He raised his glass. "To Gene Novak," he said. "A great man. A man who built something beautiful. May his legacy live forever." I picked up the burner phone and typed a message. I pressed send. On the stage, Dustin felt his phone vibrate. He pulled it from his pocket, expecting congratulations or a bank notification. He read the text. "I know about the stairs. I know about Costa Rica. Look at the screen. His face did not just fall, it collapsed. The blood left his cheeks so fast I thought he might faint. The projection screen behind the stage, the one that had been showing a slideshow of vineyard photos, flickered. The images disappeared. In their place was the security footage from his office. 200 guests watched Dustin Kerrigan open his safe. They watched him check a handgun. They heard his voice, amplified by the PA system, say the words that ended his life as a free man. He falls down the cellar stairs. I call it in the morning. 72 hours later, I have the insurance payout, and I am on a plane to Costa Rica. The crowd went silent. Not the polite silence of attention, the horrified silence of people watching a man's soul exposed on a 20-foot screen. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. A board member knocked over his chair, standing up. The jazz quartet stopped playing mid-note. Dustin spun around and saw the footage. He ripped the microphone off the stand. "That is fake," he screamed. "That is AI. Someone is framing me." But then the bathroom footage played. Not my bathroom, but the footage of him creeping into the bedroom at 2 a.m, whispering poison into a sleeping man's ear, switching out medication. The crowd watched him handle the pill bottles with the casual efficiency of a man who had done it dozens of times. A murmur rose, then a roar. People were standing. People were shouting. Someone threw a glass of wine at the stage. I walked out of the library. Big bandage on my head. Arm in a sling. I moved slowly, letting the crowd see me. They parted. They stared. They saw the old man their host had just been praising, alive but visibly battered, walking toward the stage with the quiet dignity of a man who had survived a war. I took the microphone from the stand that Dustin had knocked over. "Good evening," I said. My voice carried across the vineyard. "My name is Hank Novak. I am Gene's twin brother. For the past 5 days, I have been living in this house, pretending to be Gene while my brother recovered from the injuries this man inflicted on him." I pointed at Dustin. He backed away, shaking his head. Every bruise, every switched pill, every threat, every dollar stolen. It is all on tape. And the Napa County Sheriff is walking through the gate right now. Red and blue lights swept across the vineyard. 3 squad cars rolled up the cypress-lined driveway. Dustin looked at the police. He looked at the crowd. He looked at Jolene, who was standing at the edge of the stage with tears running down her face. She was not looking at him. She was looking at me. He ran. He vaulted off the stage and sprinted toward the parking lot. He made it about 40 yards before Big Ike, a retired smoke jumper buddy of mine who I had stationed near the gate, clotheslined him with an arm the size of a fire hose. Dustin hit the gravel face first. By the time the deputies reached him, he was spitting dirt and gravel and begging them to protect him from the people he owed money to in Vegas. They cuffed him on the ground. The crowd watched in silence as Dustin Kerrigan, the man who had toasted Gene's legacy 3 minutes ago, was dragged to a squad car with grass stains on his navy suit and blood on his lip. Jolene walked up to me. She was shaking. "Uncle Hank," she said, "I am so sorry. I knew what he was doing, and I did nothing. I was so scared. I was so weak. I looked at her. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was. But she was still Gene's little girl, and Gene would want me to leave the door open. 'You were not weak, Jolene,' I said. 'You were trapped. There is a difference. But the trap is gone now. What you do next is up to you.'" She nodded. She wiped her face. Then she did something I did not expect. She walked to the microphone. She faced 200 stunned guests and said, in a voice that barely held together, "My name is Jolene Novak. I am Gene Novak's daughter. I failed my father. I let a monster into our family, and I watched him destroy the man who gave me everything. I do not deserve your sympathy, but I am going to earn back my father's trust if it takes the rest of my life. I am starting tonight." The crowd did not applaud, but they did not look away either. It was the bravest thing I had seen in a long time, and I have seen people run into burning buildings. 1 month later, Gene and I sat on the dock behind his lake house on the Russian River, watching the sun go down. He looked like a different man. The bruises were gone. His real medication had been restored, and his blood pressure was back to normal. He had color in his face again. He was reading poetry. He was tending his vines. "Did you hear about Dustin?" Jean asked, casting a line into the water. I nodded. Hard to miss. Dustin had been charged with attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, and embezzlement. His bail was set at $5 million, which was ironic since that was roughly what he owed to the men in Vegas. Last I heard, he had been moved to protective custody after an incident in the prison cafeteria left him with a broken jaw. The men he owed money to did not forgive debts just because you were behind bars. "And Jolene?" I asked. Jean smiled. It was a real smile, the first one I had seen on his face in years. "She is working at the tasting room. Minimum wage. She asked me not to give her any special treatment. She takes the bus from the apartment she rented in town. She called me last night and asked if I wanted to have dinner, not at the estate, at a diner. She paid with her own money." "Good for her," I said. We fished in silence for a while. The river was calm. A hawk circled overhead. "You saved my life, Hank," Jean said quietly. "Not just from Dustin. From giving up. I had convinced myself that this was just what getting old looked like. I thought I deserved it. I reeled in my line. You did not deserve any of it, Jean. Nobody does. Getting old does not mean getting weak. It means you have survived more than the people trying to hurt you. That is not weakness. That is proof." Jean nodded. He cast his line again. The bobber landed with a soft plop. "Are you going back to Pine Ridge?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I think I am done with that place. Turns out the best therapy for a man like me is not sitting in a circle talking about feelings. It is protecting the people I love." I stood up and stretched. My back popped. My knees ached. I was 64 years old, and I felt every year of it. But I also felt something I had not felt in a long time. Purpose. I picked up my tackle box and headed up the dock. Jean called after me. "Hank, thank you for everything." I waved without turning around. "That is what brothers are for, Jean. That is what brothers are for." I walked up the hill toward the house. The stars were coming out over the vineyard. Somewhere in a county jail, Dustin Kerrigan was learning that the world does not bend to men who hurt the helpless. Somewhere in a small apartment, Jolene was learning to stand on her own for the first time. And right here, on this dock, my brother was learning to live again. My name is Hank Novak. I am 64 years old. I have jumped out of planes into firestorms. I have pulled strangers out of burning houses. I have wrestled with bottles and my own demons, and I have not always won. But when it comes to family, I do not lose. If you are watching this and someone is hurting someone you love, do not wait. Do not wait, it gets better. Walk in there and be the fire they are not ready for. This is the end of my story. If you enjoyed watching karma do its job, smash that like button and subscribe for more. And remember, treat the old folks in your life with respect. You never know which one of us used to jump out of airplanes for a living. See you in the next one.